All right, perfect. All right, well, welcome everyone. I am excited about this presentation. Um, Trent and I have been working with this young man for a very long time. He was one of my first youth essay scholarship awardees when I worked for IAC. Very, very intelligent young man. It is Joshua Moore from Crip Farms. He is their manager, and he also has a family lamb farm, correct, Josh?
Right. Right.
Yes, bringing beautiful lamb protein to hopefully tribal members, but everyone. So with that, I'll let you add anything else. We have a brief bio on the agenda that I sent out as well. I'm really excited about this because it's very innovative in what he is trying to do. So with that, Josh, I'll let you add anything that I missed and share your screen and begin. Thank you, everyone. Oh,
okay. Well, thank you for, it says I need to be enabled to share my screen. But while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Josh Moore. I am a member of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, and I am also their farm manager. I've been in this position for about 20 months now. Prior to that, my original career goal, I guess, when I was younger was to be an agricultural science teacher. And I did that for a year in a small town in southern Arizona. And then I worked for Cooperative Extension for about 6 years, 5.5, 6 years in Pima County in southeastern Arizona. And it was actually during the pandemic that I was contacted by leadership from my tribe asking if I would ever consider coming home. And of course, that's every young Indigenous person's dream, is to be called back into service at home, especially when I felt that my tribe had done such a great job of helping me, pay for my schooling. And so I took the role as their farm manager. And a little bit about Colorado River Indian Tribes. We're located in Western Arizona. And in Western Arizona, and we're also in Eastern California, I guess. We're right along the Colorado River. So we have about 100 miles of shoreline on both sides of the river. And altogether, our total reservation acreage is over 300,000 acres of land. Within that 300,000 acres of land, we have the right to irrigate approximately 99,000 acres in California and about 8,000 acres in California. And so altogether, Crit Farms itself is quite large. When I started, we were farming 10,682 acres of that total irrigable allotment. And as of yesterday, Crit Farms is now about 34,000 acres. So under my time here, I've been charged with greatly expanding the farm to include more of our reservation. And of course, I know that this group is made up of people from all over the region, but I think that anywhere in North America, you probably heard about the crisis that is happening on the Colorado River, specifically the shortages that we're seeing in the Colorado River. And the perspective that I come from this is that, the Colorado River Indian Tribes is the largest single allotment on the river itself. But at the same time, we're a large, commercial farming operation that uses a lot of water. And with that great honor, there's also a great amount of responsibility. And luckily, during my time here at Crit Farms, I've been given the tools to be able to look for innovative solutions for irrigation here in this region. And just a little bit more about Crit Farms. Primarily, our largest crop by far is alfalfa. Alfalfa is an extremely thirsty crop. However, the feed advantages that it has on the dairy and beef industry are quite large. And we have a lot of demand. And, this last year, we sold over $14 million worth of alfalfa within the region as well as in an international market. So it's this farm is a great economic driver and tool for the Colorado River Indian Tribes. We do a lot for the community as well. So in addition to growing alfalfa, we're also growing cotton and durum wheat, onions, Bermuda and Sudan grass. So primarily, we're a forage operation, but we're also expanding into other food crops as well. So all of our crops, of course, irrigation is always on our mind as how can we more efficiently use water. So the topics that I wanted to cover today is giving you an overview of CRIT and an outlook of what we're seeing on the Colorado River, which I know my numbers, I was looking through the presentation, are a little dated. Luckily, we did see some snowfall in the basin this year, and I think everyone is anxious to see what the runoff numbers will look like later on this summer, and hopefully that snowpack will last in the upper basin until later on in the summer. But of course, I feel like nobody can predict anything right now. In addition to that, I'll tell you a little bit about our partnership that we have with NDRIP, and I'll give you an overview of what NDRIP is, and then I'll give you an insight into what the projects that we're running with NDRIP. So one of the things that has been a focus of my time as the manager here is I really like this quote: better a cruel truth than a comfortable delusion. And I think this kind of sums up the entire situation on the lower basin in the Colorado River. It's really interesting as we've approached this and the mindsets that a lot of my neighbors and people that we do business with, their mindset about climate change. And there's a lot of people that are quite resistant to it. And there's a lot of people who question, human involvement in climate change. But I like to point this out, that no matter what your stance is on it, I was able to draw some commonalities that we saw in our own, little valley here, that everyone experienced. So this last year, by the month of March, we had five historic wind events that had higher sustained wind speeds. It broke 5 records day after day, it felt like. And by about mid-April, our irrigation report read that we were 35,000 acre feet of water over diverted that early in the year. And there were a couple of reasons why, but the biggest thing that we could point to was the ET rates coming off of our crops were probably through the roof with all of those high wind event days. And every single farmer on this reservation was irrigating far more earlier in the year. Usually we can rely on precipitation and light irrigation schedules up until about mid-May. However, this last year we weren't able to do that. And so a lot of farmers, we had to cut back. There were several farmers that were just completely shut off with water because they'd overused their allocation early on. We had to take pretty drastic measures, and it's really interesting. So I'll tell you a little bit more about NDRIP later, but when we first started partnering with NDRIP in 2020, CRIT Farms was quite lonely in terms of our participation. I feel like the adoption of technology is often scary to a lot of people, and it's interesting because agriculture are usually really rapidly adapting. However, NDRIP requires a significant shift in your perspective on how you farm. And so there's great risk to that, right? And with that, there was a lot of hesitancy where we were the single farm utilizing this project in this region. And we weren't willing really to give them a full shot where we only allocated 80 acres. And here we are this year, where I think there's probably close to 3,600 acres that will go into NDRIP this year from about 15 different farms in our region. It's just really interesting, the waiting list of people that are interested in trying this after one significant season of severe consequences from climate change, and seeing some of the things that we saw as well. So just to give you an overview, the Colorado River Indian tribes out of the mainstream of the river have a diversion of about 719,248 acre feet of water. And we have the oldest water rights on the Colorado River in the lower basin, dating all the way back to 1865. Right after us, Yuma County Water Users Association, which is a non-tribal group, they have the next allotment out of there. So, and we have diversion rights both in Arizona and California. So thinking about the law of the Colorado River, we're pretty secure in our rights in terms of, overall the length of time and the present perfected rights on the river. However, it's constantly on our mind the need to conserve more water and to really change the way that we're farming and how we're irrigating specifically, so that way we can continue to do agriculture in this valley. And I like to provide this graphic to when I do community presentations, which, they hired an old extension, I wasn't old, but extension agent to come and work as a farm manager. And so they quickly found out that one of my strengths was in presenting. In my time here, I've done probably far more community outreach than most of my predecessors did in this role, but I absolutely love it. And I think that it's really important to be able to provide our tribal membership with good visuals of what we're really talking about. And acre feet is such an abstract term that it really doesn't lend credence to the enormity of how much water Crit really has. So an acre foot of water is approximately 1 acre foot of water 1 foot deep. And the equation is 325,851 gallons of water per acre foot. And so foot deep over a football field, that's really how much water we're talking about. So some water use translations. Here in the Southwest, one average family of 4 in the US uses about 400 gallons of water per day, or 146,000 gallons per year. So that converts to 1 acre foot of water should supply 2 households of 4 people for 1 year. Now, the average US subdivision, especially focusing in the Phoenix metropolitan area, is on 24 acres of land, which would translate to about 24 acre feet of water for 1 year. Now, thinking about what agriculture uses in this region, 1 acre of alfalfa an entire year will use about 8 acre feet of water delivered to it. And then 1 acre of cotton is going to use approximately 8.5 acre feet of water. 1 acre of durum wheat will use about 3.5 acre feet of water. 1 acre of onions is 5.5 acre feet of water. And 1 acre of sprinkler irrigated potatoes is 3.5 acre feet of water. So thinking about the relative water value of food is really food and forage and fiber, I guess, from everything that we're growing. It's really important to translate, and the argument has to be made that how are we using our water in a way that equals the benefit. And of course, being a person in farming, I would argue yes, very much so. But in reality, in this entire region, especially as the drought situation becomes worse in the Southwest, I think that argument has to also be taken to the general public as well. And so thinking about what I'm responsible for, again, these acres, I only recently got to 34,000, so this is kind of old. Crit Farms at the time of this original presentation was 27,794 acres, with about 26,931 acres in Arizona and 863 acres in California. At the time of January 1st, we had fallowed 11,215 acres of land, and all of the water from that land was held up in a conservation program to leave water in Lake Mead. Internally, we fallowed, and then as well as the water that was allocated to our stack yards was about 3,567 acres worth of land. Last year, we grew 4,677 acres of alfalfa, 917 acres of cotton, 2,830 acres of durum wheat, 152 acres of onions, 665 acres of Sudan grass, and then we subleased about 4,253 acres to a potato grower for a total of 13,011 acres in production when you add in the potato sublease. So in that time frame, we ran 156,098 irrigation events, or we used about 62,700 acre feet of water. And thinking about that, if you multiply that times 2, that's about how many American households we could have given water to should we not had farmed. So the big thing about Crit, though, is that we do have a base allotment for each acre of land, and the amount of water that we fallowed is directly as a result of this. So 1 acre of Crit farmland is allocated 5.75 acre feet on a base allocation. And the cost for that is about $64 an acre, or about $11 an acre foot. So we have probably some of the most inexpensive water in the region. The other thing is water is tied to the land. After you've met your full diversion, you have 0.83 acre feet of excess water, and that's sold at a premium of a whopping $19 an acre foot. The biggest thing is you must exhaust your base allocation first, and you must prepay. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had moving forward is that conservation irrigation is not cheap by any means. And by the fact that, our irrigation water, which is, and these O&M costs, these are ran by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Although the water is as CRIT's, the irrigation system is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And in a sense, you're spending, dollars to try and save pennies. And that's just thinking about the dollar value that they place on the water itself. However, in this region, water is rapidly becoming far more expensive than oil. And it's one of those things where this situation made it quite difficult to make the case to migrate to irrigation efficiency projects. And it wasn't without the help of some funding partners in the region and nationally that really helped us get to the point where we were able to do these type of irrigation efficiency projects. So in 2022, the water duty of the reservation we assessed about 79,528 acres with a gross diversion of 609,295 acre foot. If you remember back to what our diversionary rights are, we're actually diverting far less than what we can divert. The rest of that water, especially water that is on our California part of our reservation, is unused. Other users downstream are able to use that water for essentially for free. And if you're looking at a map of Arizona and California and that whole region, directly below us, our Yuma, Palo Verde Irrigation District, Coachella, Imperial Valley, all of these huge agricultural communities just south of us are essentially, they have access to about 100,000 acre feet of water that is technically CRIT's water at no cost. So now thinking about what we did for conservation, we fallowed a bunch of land to reduce our diversion 104,106 acre foot through a conservation program with the Bureau of Reclamation's drought contingency plan, bringing our net diversion down to 505,189 acre feet. The biggest thing is that our water order is due the October of every year as part of our Part 417 negotiation with BIA and the Bureau of Reclamation. And that water order is based on a crop survey. And since CRIT Farms is by far the largest farm in the region, our tribe has historically utilized CRIT's crop plan and generalized it for the entire reservation. In addition to that diversion is calculated on a monthly basis as an approved diversion, and then which sums up to a total annual diversion. And so that is how we were able to tell early on in May that we were going to be 35,000 acre feet over diverted at the end of this last year. But luckily, the biggest thing is, well, I guess one other thing is that in the past, if CRIT over diverted, we were able to tap into what we call ICS water, or intentionally created surplus water from years past. That was kind of like a rainy day fund. However, when the Bureau of Reclamation declared a tier 1 shortage in the system, all ICS water was frozen. In addition to that, we also had in the past the ability to pull from the next year's diversion. We weren't able to do that either. So happy to report, though, because of those drastic measures and increased conservation, we came in about 11,000 acre feet under diverted at the end of the year. So, we were able to stay well within our confines. So there's a bunch of things here that are listed, and I'll just quickly breeze over them. But in 2022, we had a lot of challenges. Of course, I'd already mentioned the historic wind events and the impacts that we felt of climate change. But the other side of the story is that the agricultural prices in 2022 were those were historic as well, in the sense that alfalfa prices were through the roof, wheat prices were through the roof, Sudan grass prices were through the roof. And early on in the year, that's when in this region, we're able to produce the best crop. And so everyone was just pouring the water as if there was no end in sight. And because of that, I think that also contributed when coupled with the climate issues that we saw. That really was the perfect storm, so to speak. And of course, the only thing that kind of tempered this boom was the fact that inputs were also extremely high last year. And I fear that if there were good prices and low inputs, I don't know if we could have come back from that brink that we are on there. And so this chart here gives you the blue line is actually our approved diversion, and the red shows where we went over, and that was our actual diversions. And I didn't finish this chart, but like I said, we ended up about 11,000 acre feet under our approved diversion. So that was good. It was also good for the system, I guess, in the sense that any unused diversion that senior water rights holders do not use is directed then to the most junior water right holders. So thinking about Arizona and California specifically, in Arizona, the junior most water right user is the Central Arizona Project. And so any water that CRIT does not use goes to Central Arizona Project to a variety of cities and farms in that area. So any conservation that we do that's not tied up in a direct conservation program is then used elsewhere. And in the recent weeks, recent months, I've had a chance to talk with Bureau of Reclamation, and one of their greatest concerns is the health and human safety aspect of water users in those city areas that are considered junior most users on the river. I'm by no means am I a fan of ever expanding urban sprawl and the destruction of ecosystems and farmlands to put in more subdivisions. But at the same time, I think it really is important that there's an optimal amount of water for sanitation and human use. So that's kind of the situation, how the year ended. So some of the biggest concerns that we had this last year was that at the beginning of the last 2 years, actually, we haven't had an irrigation committee on the reservation. And one of the efforts that I put forward is to really redevelop that committee through the creation of bylaws and increased communication. The biggest thing is there's the misnomer is that neighbors talk and work together, but in reality, we really don't. And so it wasn't until we started communicating in the event of a crisis that we were able to see, positive change. And the big thing is conservation practices need to be shared. And that was one thing that I made sure that we did a lot of on CRIT farms through both our fallowing program and our use of NDRIP projects. So again, I don't know if it's that extension in education background, but we held about 5 showcase days here at the farm where we invited farmers from the region to come to CRIT farms and see what we were doing. And in addition to that, we worked with a host of grant writers to actually write grants, not just for our use, but also for the use of other tribal farmers and our neighbors in our region. And one of the grants that we got was, I think it was last year, was one of the largest conservation innovation grants through the USDA. We got a $2.1 million grant through NDRIP. That which allowed for approximately 2,000 acres of the product to be applied at no cost to the farmers on a 3-year trial basis. So I know that CRIT farms did use a lion's share. That we used about 600 acres of the product, but the rest was dispersed to other farms on a first come, first served basis. But again, remember when we first started this project, it was lonely out there where nobody was really willing to give it a shot. But this next year we'll use that full amount, and they're actually installing product on our on acreage now. The biggest other areas that we are looking is our system is approximately 50 years old, our irrigation delivery system. So we're also working on reducing spillage, and then also working on improving conveyance from our irrigation system to the farm system. And the other huge part is that there has been a lapse in responsibility of measurement on the farm gate turnout side due to some inconsistencies with leases. But the biggest claim that I've made is that you can't manage what you can't measure. And so we've really worked on also improving measurement of water on farm and working with some of our neighbors to increase that. And luckily, the NDRIP system allows us to measure in a variety of ways. So thinking about the regional outlook of this, this information is pretty outdated now. But I believe the Bureau of Reclamation had mentioned that by July of this year, we should be in a tier 2B condition, shortage, possibly a tier 3. And, that's if that runoff doesn't make its way into Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And right now, there's all these draft plans that are kind of floating forward from different states, and as well as the Bureau itself, about who's going to take cuts and what's going to take cuts. And remember, I told you that with CRIP having some of the most senior present perfected rights, we thought we were sitting pretty, relatively pretty on this whole situation. But some of these, the draft plans that have come forward show us taking as high as a 38% cut in water of our system. So the situation is quite terrifying. So moving forward, our goal is to maximize efficiency, to orient ourselves to include more conservation. And the biggest thing, and probably the most challenging thing, is to really challenge the existing mindset. And I know that in my previous career, I used to always hate that saying that, well, we've always done it this way. And I found that that is even probably more prevalent here in agriculture, is that we've always done it that way. But obviously, necessity is kind of changing that and is softening the hearts and minds of my colleagues in the field. And we're really seeing a shift towards more conservation orientation. And really, to give you the perspective, is it's not just here on this reservation, but in 2022, this is a map of continental U.S. that shows that all of these areas are experiencing drought and they're producing hay. So I'm hoping that this information with NDRIP could possibly, or if not just NDRIP itself, but other forms of conservation irrigation can be adapted to other regions as well, because I think that we're going to see some pretty challenging times moving forward. And just looking at these costs, these are, just a quick chart of some of the price increases that we've seen, and they're on the rise again. This is 2022 data, but we're seeing that in 23. These are just some breakdowns of what our fertilizer costs, how they've gone up in the last year. And then when you couple that, with that high prices and then high cost of increases, plus everything that's going on in the world, it just makes for quite turbulent times, and decision-making must be rapid. And so to give you a timeline of our partnership with NDRIP really started as a goodwill effort towards CRIT's participation in the drought contingency plan for the lower basin. And at the 2020 Colorado River Water Users Association meeting, it was actually a chance happening with NDRIP and Central Arizona Project that we developed our first trial plan. And really, it was a goodwill project. I don't know if anybody had in mind that it would grow to what it was now. So in 2021, that first project kicked off with 80 acres of milo sorghum to mixed results. So the biggest thing, if anyone who's ever converted from flood irrigation to drip irrigation could tell you, is that you really have to get used to irrigating for a way longer period of time. And looking at the germination of milo sorghum, that irrigation time frame for that first irrigation was 364 hours. And with germination, the important thing is that you get water evenly distributed across the field in a relatively short period of time. So you have, so your germination is more, I guess I want to say level and synonymous across the field, or, you have a greater consistency with the crop. However, with that milo sorghum, 364 hours worth of irrigation made for a very inconsistent germination rate, and it was all over the place. To be honest, we were pretty discouraged with that first year, but we did see some, in addition to that poor germination rate, we also had the issue of the fact that there was a lot of resistance between on-farm implementation of that first part of NDRIP. So for example, you're going to 24 on, 24 off irrigation cycles, whereas here in this region with flood irrigation, we would irrigate every 14 days. And so you're really challenging our mindset on how to do it. And there was some resistance there, which led to a lot of issues, like we waterlogged some of that milo. And so although the yields were respectable, and the water use, water efficiency was definitely up, there still wasn't a whole lot of comfort. And in 2021, when at the end of this trial, when I came on board here, I kind of saw the writing on the wall that maybe we needed to double down and really implement this, and that's really what we did. So in 2022, as the season started, we did 40 acres of alfalfa, which that acreage was supposed to be up, but as cotton prices shot through the roof, we converted more of the land that we were going to do NDRIP on to cotton. And so our cotton trial was 600 acres of land, and we were able to save a significant amount of water. And the one interesting thing on NDRIP side is that NDRIP, this was their first large-scale on-farm conversion, in the sense where nobody had ever given them this large of a project. They were 20 acres here, 80 acres there, very, very small. And so we gave them a full-size farm to go ahead and operate on, and they were able to save us some good amount of water. So before I move on to show you more about the project, alfalfa, just to give you some preliminary results, in alfalfa, we saw the first cycle of irrigation, and we get 8 cycles here about. The first cycle, we saw water savings, but there was a yield decrease. The crop went 28 days without water upon installation. The second saw water savings and a slight yield increase, about 1/4 of a ton per acre. And the third cycle saw a yield increase, but we had serious issues with the tape. So NDRIP, and I'll show you what it looks like. It doesn't get completely buried. It's about 2 inches subsurface. And the biggest thing was learning how to train our staff to run equipment over this type of tape. And if anyone's ever produced alfalfa, you have to rake the hay and flip it over to cure the bottom side of it. That rake kept getting caught. The rake kept catching that tape and ripping it out of the ground. About that same time in 2022, we saw that there was also anything with low yield, we pulled out of production and fallowed to save water. And this was by far a low yield field because of that first cutting. So we fallowed this entire field, and we cut the project short. And we've actually just redeployed tape on that system now. So we're pretty excited that. However, on cotton, we did run full season. So historically, and looking at year after years irrigation data, we use anywhere from 8.5 to 9 acre feet of water on cotton. The NDRIP, the average delivery early on in the year was only 3.8 acre feet of water. And the most efficient field only used 1.98 acre feet. I do have some yield data that I'll share at the end, but we did find that in some cases, we saw, especially everything that was planted early on in the year, had significant yield increases by about 24% compared to our non-NDRIP fields. And on average, we saved about 32% water compared to historical use of water. So again, yield saving or yield increase plus water savings was really kind of a dream come true for us. And this work is being independently verified by the University of Arizona. We have a researcher that is part of this project. And so there should be some papers coming out that kind of explain this project more in depth. So let me pull up really quickly more information about NDRIP itself, so you can get an idea. So NDRIP, the N in NDRIP stands for New Drip. NDRIP is a company based out of Israel. And Israel is really a world leader in terms of irrigation efficiency projects. And I've had a chance to meet with NDRIP CEO several times. And, we talk about the issues in the region. And the man's name is Professor Yuri Shani. And at one time, he was Israel's minister for internal water usage there in Israel. And he would always tell me, he's like, Josh, the answer is quite simple. Just make water more expensive and everybody will conserve it. And he had told me basically what Israel did is they converted the price of irrigation water to about $600 an acre foot. And all of a sudden, there was no water to do any agriculture, primarily because of that high expense. And thinking about where CRIT stands, our water is only $11 an acre foot. I told Professor Shani quite rapidly, I was like, are you trying to, find me out in a field with a gun to my head? I will definitely not make any friends that way. But at the same time, he really challenged that mindset of thinking, well, when we start valuing water as the commodity that it truly is, that's really when people will start saving. So we're still on our way to doing that. But looking at where this technology came from is pretty interesting, and the mindset that he had. And so the difference between NDRIP and conventional drip is that NDRIP does not utilize it utilizes a gravity system with minimal filtration, whereas converting from drip irrigation, conventional pressurized drip irrigation to from flood is you then have to have a power source, you have to have an expensive sand filter, and you have to pressurize that tape. And granted, there is research that shows since 1973 is when a lot of that initial drip tape was coming out, was that you could leave the tape in the ground for greater than 10 years. So there were some huge benefits. But the other side effect is that you gave up your conventional flood irrigation. And to this day, I would say that adoption into drip irrigation, pressurized drip, is still relatively low. The nice thing with NDRIP is that you don't have to completely give up your flood infrastructure. NDRIP actually utilizes a great portion of your flood infrastructure. And in thinking about the climate effects that we're seeing this year, especially looking at the Central Valley of California, is that sometimes you're seeing times of extreme drought, but in other seasons, you may see opportunities with extreme amounts of water to utilize. So by still having that flood infrastructure there, that could allow for opportunities for flood irrigation to do things like aquifer recharge. So flood irrigation traditionally, right here, they're using these poly pipes to irrigate, whereas on NDRIP, what you do is you punch into the main canal there, or a main line, and you only need about 2 feet of elevation in order to have just the right amount of pressure to run the system. From there, the water then moves into a siphon tank. So there's that siphon tank there. And then from there, it runs out into, there's a couple ways you can do this. With alfalfa, we are using a PVC main line. With cotton, we use lay flat main line. And then from there, you connect we do spacing about 42 inches. Every 42 inches, we run drip tape in the crop, and there's an emitter about every 8 inches. And that emitter is it uses, I think, less than 1 PSI of pressure to be able to get ample amount of water to the crop. So this is, of course, NDRIP. They prepared me these slides, so I'm sure there's a little bit of bias with this. But the biggest thing is compared to conventional drip, it is quite cost effective. The cost to utilize NDRIP is about $1,500 an acre, whereas if you were to convert existing flood infrastructure to pressurized drip, you're looking anywhere from $3,500 to $4,000 an acre. So it is a cost effective method. NDRIP touts being highly efficient, and I would argue I would argue in agreement with them that it was pretty efficient compared to our flood irrigation. And then the other thing is the modular nature of it means that it's quite reversible in the sense where in thinking about adoption of this technology, there were several times throughout the season where some of my leadership structure here, has well over 30 years of experience growing cotton in this region. And there were times where during our meetings, we came forward my help came forward and said that, Josh, the crop is extremely stressed out. We need to flood. And after consultation with NDRIP and with their agronomists, in some cases, they said, yes, you do need to flood. And that could have been for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest challenges that we saw was that it's not until you're trying to save water that you realize how inefficient your existing system is. And a lot of our lined canals were greater than 50 years old. And so all of a sudden you're running low pressure irrigation through this canal system for 24 to 48 hours at a time. We're blowing canals out left and right. And because of that, we had to constantly try and stay ahead of the maintenance aspect of it. But the system allowed us to be able to, do what we were comfortable with. The other thing is that NDRIP had told us that the most efficient use of their system was to run water, run fertilizer through their system. And of course, with the cost of fertilizer, I said, well, I don't know about that. I think we're just going to do with what we're comfortable. So we did it once my way. And then after that, we were like, okay, well, let's at least give it a shot. And we used far less fertilizer that second go round. And it got right to where the crop needed it. The drip tape is right near the root zone. And so after that, it was kind of history from there, in the sense that we did all of our water run fertilizer through their system as well. So the biggest differences, as I had mentioned, was that you can utilize the existing infrastructure. There's no pumps and there's no filters. The other thing is NDRIP came with a Connect system, which was really handy. So there were sensors out in the field that would give me real-time data of what was going on in the field, that allowed me to monitor soil moisture. And from there, we could plan our irrigation cycles from that. And it was really interesting being able to farm from your cell phone, which I know there's a lot of product out there that allows you to do that. But the neat thing was that in real time, you could see your flow rate data, and then it would give you a prescription of about how much water that it thought you needed. And part of the NDRIP and thinking about it as an innovative solution, not only did it come with technology, but we also had access to NDRIP's experts from across the world, which NDRIP is, I think, in almost on every continent except for Antarctica. And in some of those continents like Australia, they've been using NDRIP for a lot longer than we have. And so we had access to experts from all over the world to kind of help us through this. And every farmer that works with them also has that same access. So the biggest thing is looking at how that dripper works. On a regular pressurized dripper, you'll see there's this inlet that has this very complex network of ridges, and that causes it to really be really energy intensive, and you have to filter that water to get through all of those small channels there. And because of that, there's quite a few clogging points with that. However, the NDRIP emitter is really quite simple in the sense where water flows in through that inlet and out through there, and it allows you to use, relatively compared to conventional drip, you can use relatively dirty water, so to speak. Granted, there are several methods that we did use to filter it through gravity, like several different types of filter, like there was a netting that we put in there to try and get out as much of the organic matter as possible. And then we had a screen on the inlet. So that was about all of the filtration that we did. And really, we were able to use that existing infrastructure, and we didn't have to pay for additional power. So quite simple. And NDRIP just kind of provides you with everything that I've already told you. I'll include this in the slides. And really, this is what the system would look like if you were to run conventional drip. You'd have this sand filter here, plus you see that big diesel motor there that's requiring you to run several times, whereas with NDRIP, it ties right into that canal, and there's just a tiny little port there that feeds into this main tank here. This is also where you would add in your fertilizer as well. And from there, it feeds out into this lay flat. And this is looking at a soybean field in the Midwest in Nebraska. It then runs into a lay flat main line out into the field. So in the soybean study that they did, NDRIP versus flood, it used 50% less water and 24% increase in yield. And looking at what we did with cotton, here is a couple of pictures of our cotton that we grew. We grew absolutely beautiful cotton. And one of the biggest challenges that we have with flood irrigation, especially on heavy soils, is that you get a lot of humidity in the furrows in the very most important part of the season. And because there's no water running through those furrows, you have very little humidity. So we saw less abortions in cotton fruit in the middle of the summer that we would normally see elsewhere. And so here's some information about that sorghum trial. When you compare NDRIP to flood, we use 3.7 acre feet in comparison to 5.1 acre feet on flood. That was a 27.5% savings. And that efficiency was a 22.7 compared to a 20.2. So it was about 12.4% more efficient. The cotton, this was preliminary data from April through September. Again, our cotton season lasted through January this year, so this data is a little bit short-lived. They grew cotton in Tonopah as well, which wasn't part of our reservation, so I'm not too familiar with that data, but they saved about 33% irrigation water. Where they found a lot of success is in orchards, specifically in really sandy soil. So another region just south of us is Yuma, and crops that they did N-drip on had a 72% savings in water with drip irrigation on citrus. And they're also doing trials on sorghum in Maricopa, which is in central Arizona, 53% savings in water. And of course, there's some studies on soybean and corn from the Midwest. And N-drip really has a global presence. So now thinking about what our yield data look like, let me share some of that really quickly. All right. So these are all of the N-drip fields. These were the early planted fields. I thought it was really important to differentiate between. We did one trial field. This was extremely heavy clay soil, so it was really a poor choice for the control field, primarily because it wasn't a good sample of what the rest of our soil types were across the farm. But this is the bales of cotton per acre. Which for us, industry standard is about 3 bales of cotton per acre. And we did have a few that were below that, but we also had some that were really good yields. Right here on the River Ranch, we saw over 6 bales of cotton per acre and about 5.4 acre feet of water used. So altogether, looking at that yield data, early planted N-drip yield on average was 4.1 bales. The control yield was 4.6. Again, I think it's important right here to mention that this was heavy clay, so it's already a lot more efficient. But on average, early planted N-drip water usage was 6.07. And when you compare that to what our traditional planned water usage is between 8.5 and 9, we saw a 27% yield increase, as well as a 32% water savings as well, on average on that early planted. Late planted cotton was quite different though. Yields were quite low. We were planting as late as May. And for us, if you're not really, March is the ideal time to plant cotton. And we were planting as late as May for a couple of reasons, primarily because it took us so long to do some tillage work. And of course, we were fighting the weather early on in that year. So these were all very late planted fields here. Late planted N-drip yield was about 1.5 bales per acre. Late planted controlled yield was 2.4 bales per acre. So on lates, the flood irrigation did do better, but it really was nothing to be proud of. And then the water usage was 2.3 acre feet. And we didn't actually record water usage in the same format for the control. So I'm still working on getting that water data though for the control fields. Or sorry, these weren't really even control fields. They were just extra fields that we planted. So still pouring through the irrigation reports for that. All right. So some of the things that I witnessed during this, and from my perspective, was that I've kind of said a lot of this stuff, but the thing that I liked is that N-drip really allowed us to adopt at our own pace, where we had the opportunity to kind of go back and forth with what we were comfortable with. So there provided to be a lot of comfort there. And the other thing is this partnership had really allowed us to both change our protocols on the fly to really adapt to the situation in the field. So N-drip, I know, probably has a whole new playbook of how they're going to do things now after this trial. And for us, it really changed our perspective. And the biggest thing that we learned was that as soon as you lose soil moisture in your fields, that's when you're in trouble. So it challenged our mindset quite extensively in the sense that rather than waiting a number of calendar days before irrigation, we were really monitoring soil moisture and giving the crop the irrigation that it needed at the right time. So with that being said, I believe I'm pretty close to pretty close to out of time now. But if you have any questions for me, I'll take them now, of course. But here is my contact information. And if you have questions on the NDRIP side, their vice president of operations here in the U.S. is a man named Yuri Segev, and he's based out of the LA area, but that's his contact information as well.
Wonderful. You nailed it. You're not even a minute over. I just have so many questions. So, Josh, I could not be more proud. You are just killing it. They're so lucky to have you. This was incredible. We're so glad we have this recorded. We are going to tap into your brain a lot more going forward here. I have a couple of questions. My first question, and then we'll go to anyone else, but my first question is, why does BIA own the irrigation?
That's a good question. So the irrigation system was developed in the 1940s. That's when they first started doing it. And the Crit Reservation was home to 3 Japanese internment camps as part of the Japanese relocation program during World War II. And originally, our whole reservation was set up as a home for the intern Japanese Americans. And they did a lot of the work on the system. And my personal opinion is that it was kind of an afterthought. Oh, we can leave the system in place for the tribe. So the ownership still belongs to the BIA. CRIT is currently working on a variety of plans to take over ownership of it. The biggest reason why we're really slow to react is that, like a lot of projects, there's a lot of deferred maintenance, probably over $150 million in deferred maintenance on this irrigation system. Bureau of Reclamation, a sister department within Department of Interior, gives our system about a 54% efficiency. So that's pretty sad to think, especially in terms of the crisis that we're experiencing in this region, that there is a major system here that is only 54% efficient. So with some of these, we have a whole host of projects that we're working on, which again, the tribe hired me as a farm manager, but I often find myself in irrigation meetings working with our irrigation department on looking at different technologies, really to try and help the tribe gain efficiency in the system, and hopefully in the future also take ownership of the system, or through the assistance of BIA to improve their system as well. But a lot of the funding that has come out recently, like the bipartisan infrastructure law, a lot of the funding there, the BI system is actually ineligible for that funding, a lot on part because it's another federal department. So Bureau of Reclamation isn't going to pay for Bureau of Indian Affairs infrastructure. So we've really had to get creative.
But your tribe should be eligible for EQIP through NRCS, CSP, and so that you can take this over and increase that number, I feel like.
Right. So a lot of the EQIP and like the RCPP and a lot of the USDA programs are for on-farm efficiency, which, although flood irrigation is inefficient, our biggest issue is the actual irrigation system itself. That's the one that's 54% or 54% efficient. So for example, there are 8 major spillways along our system, and there's one that's located closely to me that spills 14,000 acre-feet a month back in the system. That's unused water. It's just free flowing through the system. Again, we have a lot of different EQIP projects and grant for on-farm efficiency, but it's really the system that needs improvement.
So will NDRIP work on, like, is it cost effective for, say, an alfalfa field that's only 100 acres?
So our alfalfa fields are about 40 acres. So it really depends on a whole host of things, but the biggest thing with NDRIP though is they have a design team that'll come out and they'll survey your land, and from there they'll design their system to fit the needs of the field. They'll look at the height of your irrigation system, how much fall you have at the end of your field, and it's kind of tailor-made to each field. The other thing is is that depending on soil type as well, they'll differentiate the distance between tapes based upon the needs as well. So we learned in our first trial was 48-inch widths. However, on sandier soils, we dropped it down to 42-inch depth or widths between the tape. So the biggest thing is their team is willing to kind of offer that solutions based, and they have a whole host of variety. But the biggest thing that I appreciated was they also provide irrigation help as well. Obviously, it's their system and they want it to work. So during this time period, my irrigation team and their irrigation team were working hand in hand, learning how to use the system. For this next year, what we're hoping to develop is really the center of excellence, where they've trained enough of my staff so that way we can fully take over their system. And when the only time we need to call them is when there's a repair that we can't do. And of course, as part of our agreement is they then come on and fix it.
Okay, awesome. Just because we have some, I mean, CRIT is giant, but, this would be great for, just tribal producers. Okay, next question, Maureen.
Yeah, Josh, did you write this trial report up or the data somewhere, or are you going to be putting it together in a report that through University of Arizona or anywhere?
Dr. Charles Sanchez at the University of Arizona is actually writing up the report. So we reported all of our data to him. And in addition to that, he also put some flow meters in canals on our system. So he has data that I actually haven't seen yet. So I believe there'll be a full report coming out shortly. So we just actually got our final yield data for cotton. So yeah, a lot of this is based on preliminary data. So of what I presented. So he's got the full report that should be coming out, and I'll make sure we share it.
Yeah, if you could just make sure Trent has it. Fabulous presentation, Joshua. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, good to see you.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Hi, folks. Well, I wanted to come back and see my friends.
Yes.
And Trent and
hey,
Stacy and Maureen. Joshua, excellent talk. Really, really well done. So I have really enjoyed it. I was just wondering, so now that you have NDRIP focused on some of your more water intensive crops, you've got a lot of flexibility there because, obviously if you're thinking about growing sorghum, that's going to be, you can conserve more water if you grew that and you were successful. But I'm not sure how the pricing of the crop actually, is that going to actually become one of your dominant crops eventually? Because oftentimes when we have these situations where we've got a lot of drought, we're trying to get folks to keep in the back of their mind the ability to do crop substitution. And it looks to me like you're going to have a lot of flexibility with your irrigation system so that you could put crops in and take them out, depending upon not only the going rate for the crop, but also the going rate for water. What do you think?
Yeah, that's always the economics have to work out, obviously, for the crop. But the other thing is we've also, in addition to some of the technology that we're looking at, we're also investing in other options, I guess, so to speak, for what we're doing. And so I'd mentioned that we're going from about 10,682 acres that I was directly farming to closer to this next year will be at about 24,000. We'll still have some fallow. A lot of that land has been fallowed for greater than 3 years. So thinking about rebuilding the microbiology in the soil itself is also really important to us. We're using a whole host of different products and running a lot of different trials. One of the best things about this fallow program that we engaged in was that now we have about 12,000 acres that can be certified as organic farmland. So we're really looking at a whole host of different other things to rebuild up the soil biology. But one of the things that is really helping is looking at the water the conservation aspect of the crops like sorghum, Sudan grass, and things like that, where it uses far less water than alfalfa and cotton. So really what I'm looking at is we are growing close to about 3,000 acres of milo this year. And our goal is after we harvest the head and the grain from it will come back, and we'll actually use that as green manure back in the field to try to rebuild up that soil structure. A lot of the fields that we did fallow were really, really light soils. And after several years of fallow, there's very little organic matter left in that soil. So the biggest thing is although the economics, there's not a whole lot of profit margin in what we're growing this year, there's that investment in rebuilding the soil structure. And a friend of mine, I know she's a friend of Vicky's as well, Kelsey, I can't remember what her, Kelsey Ducheneau.
Yep.
Yeah, IAC, she has a married name now, but I listened to a talk about the importance of investing in your soil structure as a huge part. I know she comes from more from a beef operation, but even on the farming side, I've really been able to drive that point home. So we're doing a lot as well to reinvest in that soil structure and that's not something that we've always done. We've always farmed pretty intensely, but with crop rotations and utilizing different types of compost, and of course, putting back that green manure, trying to build up the organic matter, that's a huge focus of ours. So if it means taking a slight loss to then, have a better soil at the end of the year, that's all the better for us.
This is honestly. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
That's okay. I was just, and I thought I heard that you had talked to Irrigation. Was that right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. This is a small world because he postdoced with John Hanks and myself at Utah State University way back when I was a very young professor. And so he's a very bright guy. And I remember he was in charge of Mekarot, the water company of Israel, for quite a few years. And I actually interacted with a lot of his employees when I was over there giving webinars and lectures and that kind of thing. But I haven't seen Uri for a long time. So if you happen to talk to him again, say hi to Jim for me.
Yeah, he's here in the U.S. quite frequently. So the next time he's around, I'll be sure to let him know.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Joshua. Excellent talk.
Thank you.
Yes. I just want to say this is a game changer for producers. Marty and I have an alfalfa field about 100 acres, and we're just considering doing an equip with pivots. But what would work way better, because we're in sand and wind and everything, is these strips. Mm-hmm. And I just think this is amazing. So be prepared. We are going to be we would love to partner with you on educating as many tribal members as we can.
Awesome.
Well, Vicky,
good.
Vicky, that would be excellent to see whether the system, how the system performed in your climate versus CRIT.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things so NDRIP is not an approved EQIP program yet. Part of the aspect of the SIG grant, the Conservation Innovation Grant, is to verify at the end of that grant if it becomes EQIP approved. And so I never realized how many tours I'd have to give in this role, but NRCS has been to CRIT several times now to kind of look at our project. So I know that the next time they come down, they were supposed to send some engineers to kind of look at the system some more with the goal of then making it an EQIP approved project. So once that information comes in, and of course, on the other side of this is that if you're ever in the area, please, reach out to me and I give one mean tour, that's for sure. So I love
so we would like to host a tour with some tribal producers. The other thing is has the Native American liaison for NRCS been there yet?
On the national level, I know that we've got a lot of interaction on the state level. Not any national interaction yet.
Okay, so I'm in close connection with him. The chief is really wanting to get involved in Indian country. He felt like when he was in Vegas, he was not prepared. And so they have reached out to me, not only for agents, but for tribal side of this. So I think Maureen and I have been visiting on text that we need to get some scholarship, maybe just a small group of 10 people that we can scholarship to bring in here that are tribal farm managers. So we do it at the tribal level that they can then trickle down to the producer level. And I'm just developing this, Marie, because this is too good to not do something. And then we can get Ted down there too. His name's Ted Bulow. He's from like Wisconsin, and I think it would be outstanding. And maybe we can even see if we can tap into NRCS money to get producers down there, Maureen, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And we just don't want to come in August, okay?
Right. Well, I was just going to say is that I'm on the Southwest Indian Ag Association board, and one of our we're looking into hosting this next year's conference at CRIT. So we're planning in January, which is a lovely time of year to be in this part of Arizona.
Yes.
Okay, so we want to also piggyback on SWIA, and this hasn't gotten to you yet, and Trent is working on this, but we want to piggyback a day before SWIA for native climate. So that would be outstanding. And we
Jim,
need to get
to come.
Yep, and we need to get like Occitan there so they know this is something that they could fund. Yep. Yeah, and get NRCS there. We need to go national so we can get this approved through EQIP.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Josh didn't have time, but one of the other things he's doing out there is looking at a new crop that's more efficient as far as that, but it's an industrial crop for the rubber product. So he's going to start that, I think, this spring. Or
the crop grows in the ground next week, hopefully. So
next week, really?
Yeah.
How far is CRIT from Phoenix?
And well, it depends on how fast you drive, but it's about 150 miles west of Phoenix on the I-10. So from the airport, it takes me about 2 hours and about 15 minutes.
Okay, so Trent, what if we still do Wild Horse Pass, but Native Climate hosts a tour, Maureen? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh, we've got to see this in person. I think this would just be great.
For our summit, we host a tour either on the front end or the back end.
It'd be the back end maybe, because if you did it the front end for you guys and then we do the tour, they could go down that way and maybe tag in with SWIA.
Yeah.
And then
we'll take this offline. But no, this is great. Fantastic.
Yeah, because I still want to be at Wild Horse Pass because we're going to get the most people there. But
Joshua, this was great.
Yes,
really,
amazing.
Really
all right.
Good presentation.
Okay, we can stop recording. Thank you, everyone, for being on. This was absolutely